"This floor isn't for your kind, ma'am." The words hung in the air like a slap. Dr. Celeste Monroe didn't blink. She stood perfectly still in her cream-colored tailored suit, a leather briefcase resting at her side. The security guard's stance stiffened, one hand hovering near his radio, the other gesturing, politely, but firmly, toward the elevator behind her. "You'll need to leave this floor immediately," he said. "This vault level is for legacy clients only, people with long-standing history." He didn't look her in the eyes when he said it. Celeste glanced beyond him to the frosted glass doors marked Vault Level 3C, Restricted Access. Behind those doors lay the original founding documents of her mother's trust, the trust that helped build this very bank. The air was cool, sterile. Polished marble floors reflected the low lighting like a mirror. She took a slow breath. "I'm here for a scheduled inspection." The guard's jaw tensed. "Do you have an appointment through internal compliance?" "I don't need one." "Ma'am, everyone needs one." That's when Gregory Mayfield arrived. Slicked back hair, navy pinstripe suit, the kind of man who mistook rank for power and manners for weakness. "What's going on here?" he asked, eyeing Celeste like a misplaced file folder. "She's trying to access Vault 3C, the guard answered. Gregory's brows rose, amused. "You mean that Vault 3C? Celeste turned to face him. "Correct. Do you mind me asking who you're here on behalf of?" "Myself?" That made him laugh, an actual chuckle. "Look, I'm not trying to be difficult, but this area is for board-level clients, real legacy families, old money." He lowered his voice just enough to be insulting. "No offense." Celeste didn't answer. She simply opened her briefcase and pulled out a silver access card. Embedded with a biometric pad, it had Clear Vault Root Access etched along its edge. Gregory squinted at it, then smiled. "Ma'am, I don't know where you got that, but I designed the protocol," Celeste said. He blinked. "I'm not here to request access. I'm here to conduct a compliance verification under Clause 710. Gregory's smile faded. "Clause what?" Celeste's voice was calm, but it cut like glass. "Clause 77, Ethics Trigger Verification. Your team denied me entry. You escalated without cause. That activates a review." "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult," he said, louder now. "This is a highly secure area. If you don't step away, I'll have to call—" "You already did," she said quietly, glancing at the guard's radio. The man froze. Celeste reached for her phone, tapped a single line of code, and hit send. "Clear Vault. Activate code 77. System-wide audit lock." She stepped back, calm as ice. Behind Gregory, the biometric scanner let out a high-pitched beep. Then another. Then total silence. The hallway lights flickered, then turned red. Vault 3C's doors sealed themselves with a magnetic thunk. Gregory turned around. "What?" The wall monitor behind him flashed. "Vault access suspended. Ethics compliance lock triggered New York. Locked San Francisco. Locked Dallas. Locked Chicago. Local. Locked." "What is this?" Gregory snapped, jabbing at the screen. "Who authorized this?" Celeste slowly sat down on a bench beside the elevator. She crossed one leg over the other and pulled out a small black notebook. "I did," she said. 9 minutes earlier. The morning had started like any other. Celeste had arrived quietly through the executive parking garage, swiped her way past 3 levels of access, and walked into the lobby of Monarch Bank's flagship branch. She wasn't dressed like a billionaire. That was the point. Celeste Monroe was the type of woman who never had to announce herself until someone forced her to. Her briefcase held original audit papers for her mother's estate trust, plus the controlling share documentation of Valor. Trust Financial, the private capital firm she'd co-founded 20 years ago. A firm that, unbeknownst to most, now held controlling design rights and root-level protocol access to Clear Vault, the most secure banking storage infrastructure in North America. She wasn't there to make noise. She was there to verify one paper. But what happened instead was something else entirely. 10 minutes later, the first executive arrived in a sprint. Chief Security Officer Glenn Barker. He took one look at the red warning lights and the flashing clear vault dashboard and turned pale. "Who triggered a code 77? He demanded. Celeste stood, calmly handed him her ID card. He swallowed hard. Gregory watched, frozen in disbelief. "Ma'am," Barker said, clearing his throat. I wasn't aware you were on site." "You weren't supposed to be," she replied. He nodded quickly, already reaching for his earpiece. "We'll stand down all operations and notify legal immediately." "You should," she said. Celeste looked at Gregory then, really looked at him. "You called security on a woman carrying root-level vault access, without even checking her ID." Gregory's mouth opened, then closed. A long silence followed. Then, from the other end of the hallway, glass doors slid open. 3 people in dark suits entered, walking in swift, deliberate formation. The woman in front carried a tan leather folio and a single sheet of paper. The header read, "Notice of temporary suspension. Ethics trigger activation. Clear vault systems." Celeste turned to Gregory one last time. "You denied me access to something I built," she said softly. "Now 3 banks can't access $920 million in assets until we review how you treat people at the door." Gregory's face turned gray. She walked past him, the team of attorneys flanking her without a word. The vault behind her remained sealed. But it wasn't the vault that had closed that day. It was the illusion of power and who people thought it belonged to. The marble in the main atrium of Monarch Bank's flagship branch was the kind that whispered money. The floors gleamed with a glassy polish, reflecting the soft amber lights above. Classical string music drifted in faintly from hidden speakers, the kind of ambient soundtrack meant to make wealthy clients feel at ease, and outsiders feel like they should lower their voices. Dr. Celeste Monroe walked through that atrium like a shadow that no one expected to see. She moved with quiet confidence, heels silent, posture precise, expression unreadable. But every eye turned toward her, as if she'd tripped an invisible alarm. It wasn't the kind of attention that greeted their typical high-net-worth clients. There were no warm smiles, no "welcome back, ma'am," no one rushing forward to offer water or a seat. Instead, there were glances, sideways, subtle. Then, not so subtle. The front desk associate paused in her typing to stare. A pair of well-dressed women, one carrying a Louis Vuitton briefcase, whispered something behind manicured hands. A young intern half rose from his desk before someone next to him shook their head. Celeste stopped at the security checkpoint for the executive floor. A polished brass gate, flanked by 2 uniformed guards. One of them, an older man with a buzz cut, glanced at her ID card. His eyes dropped to her name, then to her face, then to the card again. "You're here for executive vault access?" "Yes," she replied, calm. "I'm gonna have to get someone." She nodded once. "Take your time." He picked up the phone, speaking in low tones as he glanced over at her. Celeste turned away from the desk, scanning the room. The energy had shifted. It wasn't just the quiet judgment anymore. Now it was discomfort, awkwardness, the unspoken tension of a room trying not to look while absolutely looking. An assistant manager in a royal blue vest walked up with a tablet. "Good morning," she said politely. "How can I help you today?" "I'm here for a compliance inspection related to Vault 3C, Celeste replied. "My credentials are on file." The woman glanced at the security log. "You don't appear on today's appointment schedule. Did you receive confirmation?" "I didn't require one." The woman blinked. "I'm sorry?" Celeste handed her the silver card from her briefcase. "This authorizes on-demand audits. Root protocol level." The woman took the card, turned it over, frowned. "I'll be right back." Of course she would. Celeste waited, arms relaxed at her sides. She wasn't impatient. She was used to systems running late. She designed half of them herself. Behind her, the whispers continued. One man muttered, "Somebody's bald." Another, further back, said, "She must be in the wrong place." Then came the line that made her mouth tighten ever so slightly. "Probably a contractor or someone's assistant." No one said it with venom. That's what made it worse. The comments didn't come from outright hatred. They came from assumption, from comfort, from the unchecked certainty that someone like her, black, quiet, alone, couldn't possibly be important enough to belong here. It wasn't new. Not to her, not to any woman who'd spent years navigating boardrooms where no one looked like her. But it still stung, because this wasn't just any bank. This was Monarch. And Monarch wouldn't even be here. This branch, this floor, these vaults, without her. 12 years ago, she'd sat in a bare concrete office 2 floors below this one, signing the initial development financing for Monarch's entire vault system. She'd written the first $320 million in funding through Valor Trust, structured the first-generation governance charter, co-designed the biometric failsafe still in use across 3 states. This building had her signature in its bones. And now, here she was, being mistaken for an assistant. She stepped aside as a team of 4 white men in expensive suits passed through the checkpoint. One nodded vaguely in her direction, more out of reflex than respect. Another glanced down at her briefcase, then quickly looked away. No one held the door for her. She didn't ask them to. Instead, she walked back to the far bench by the window and sat down. From there, she could see the main teller windows and the private lounge area. 2 clients sipped bottled water from crystal glasses. A young woman behind the desk offered sparkling or still to a man with a signet ring. No one offered Celeste a glass, not even tap. Her phone buzzed once. "Legal team has entered building. 2 minutes out." She turned the screen off and crossed her legs, smoothed the lapel of her jacket, waited. The woman in the blue vest returned with Gregory Mayfield. "Dr. Monroe?" Gregory's voice was louder than necessary. "Hi, I understand you're trying to access our executive vault." Celeste looked up, her expression calm. "That's correct." Gregory offered the kind of smile that was made for press photos and insincerity. "I think there might be some confusion. This level is only accessible to individuals with verified legacy credentials. For security purposes, of course." She didn't blink. "I'm not confused. Then you must realize we can't just let anyone down there." "Anyone?" she echoed. He hesitated. "You're not on the board access list, and we have very strict requirements. Even high-level clients need appointments." Celeste stood. Gregory instinctively stepped back, just a hair. "You said verified legacy," she said. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means long-standing relationships, families we've worked with for generations, people who've invested in our institution." Celeste stepped forward, calm, deliberate. "I signed your first $320 million infrastructure loan in 2011. Gregory's face twitched. "I co-architected your vault biometric system with Evergreen Secure Tech." No response. "My firm controls the failover rights for your vault access protocol, and the documents you're refusing me access to were signed by my mother and ratified by me." A long pause followed. Gregory cleared his throat. "Even so, we have—" Celeste held up a hand. "Just one." "I don't need your permission." He stopped mid-sentence. "I triggered a compliance audit 3 minutes ago," she said. "Your system is locked. Vault 3C is currently frozen. New York, San Francisco, and Dallas went red within 90 seconds. You're losing access to $920 million in high-net-worth storage by the minute." His mouth fell open. "You might want to call someone," she added. Right on cue, a wave of phone buzzes erupted across the floor. Executives stood up. Assistants rushed in. Screens flickered. The lobby's polished calm shattered like a dropped glass. And Celeste? She sat back down, calm as ever. She crossed her legs again, folded her hands in her lap, and said softly, "Now let's see how long it takes before someone offers me a glass of water." The bench by the window was too elegant to be comfortable. Celeste sat perfectly still on its polished leather cushion, one leg crossed over the other, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Around her, the vault floor churned with confused urgency. Phones buzzed. Screens blinked red. Senior associates shuffled from desk to desk like storm clouds in expensive shoes. And yet no one came to her. Not yet. She watched the floor with clinical calm, her gaze drifting over the marble and glass and brushed nickel that had once made her proud. She remembered when this place was just a rendering in a pitch deck. She'd walked the skeleton of this building in a hard hat and heels, breathing in drywall dust and vision. Now they didn't even recognize her face. Maybe that was the point. Her phone buzzed again. System confirms. Vault access locked. SF DAL CHI. Legal team entering atrium now. Across the room, Gregory Mayfield had gone pale. He stood near the main desk, clutching his phone like a life vest, his voice hushed but frantic. From this distance, she couldn't hear his words, but she didn't need to. She knew the rhythm of panic well enough. She'd once felt it herself, in another lifetime, back when she still thought merit alone could protect you. Her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to a moment 12 years ago. It was after midnight in a downtown DC conference room. She'd been the only black woman at a 20-person table, the youngest by a decade. Her pitch had landed cold. No one smiled. No one interrupted. No one believed in a vault ethics system designed by a woman with no Ivy League last name. Until she signed the first check herself, $320 million from Valor Trust. That was the beginning of Clear Vault. She hadn't just funded it, she'd designed it. Written the first risk logic in Python herself. She still had the notebook. And now, here she sat, surrounded by people who thought she was lost. Celeste reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small leather folio. She flipped through the pages slowly. Originals, audit trails, memos between her firm and Monarch's founding board. And there it was. Monarch Vault Funding Agreement. Initial disbursement, 2011. Signer, Dr. Celeste Monroe. Amount, $320,000. The room blurred slightly. Not from emotion, from restraint. She'd always believed in handling insult with structure, shame with systems. She didn't raise her voice. She rewrote the rules. And yet, today hurt more than she expected. Not because they didn't recognize her, but because they didn't even look. A woman walked past, glancing down at Celeste's folio with visible discomfort. She clearly thought Celeste was reviewing someone else's documents. Celeste smiled politely. Across the floor, Gregory's voice rose. No, I don't know who she is. That's the problem. Celeste closed the folio. It didn't matter what he knew. Her legal team was 5 steps away. She stood, smoothing her jacket. Her reflection in the glass wall stared back. Sharp lines, composed strength. No edges softened. She looked exactly like the woman who'd built a billion-dollar firm from nothing. The woman they chose not to see. And then a voice spoke beside her. Excuse me, I think I know who you are. Celeste turned. An older woman, maybe late 60s, stood a few feet away. Her hair was silver and styled in soft curls. Her purse large and old-fashioned. Her posture upright with the grace of a different generation. I don't mean to interrupt, the woman said gently. But are you Dr. Monroe? Celeste hesitated. Yes, the woman smiled. I met your mother years ago. She spoke at a fundraiser for single mothers. I was one. Celeste's expression softened. Thank you for telling me that. She said her daughter would build something that lasts, something more honest than power. Celeste looked down, her throat tightening unexpectedly. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, the woman continued. But I saw what's happening, and I just want you to know, someone here remembers what this building is really made of. Celeste gave a small nod. That means more than you know. God bless you, the woman whispered, touching Celeste's arm lightly. Don't let them rattle you. Celeste didn't say thank you right away. She just held the woman's gaze for a moment longer, then exhaled quietly. "Not today," she said. Then the doors opened. 3 figures in charcoal suits entered the atrium like storm fronts. No flash, no raised voices, just presence, the kind that made people straighten without realizing they had. In the center was Evelyn Price, Celeste's general counsel. At her side walked Jared Lynn, lead compliance attorney, and Avery Brooks, regulatory affairs. Each carried a leather folio. Evelyn's had a red tag on the corner, Emergency Protocol 77. Gregory spotted them too late. Wait, he stammered, rushing toward the team. "We're sorting things out now. There was a misunderstanding." "No," Evelyn said coolly, without breaking stride. "There was a violation." Gregory's mouth opened, then closed. "Are you the branch compliance officer?" Jared asked. I oversee floor-level access." "Then you're liable for the initial refusal. We'll need a signed statement within the hour." Celeste stepped forward. Gregory turned to her, panic flashing in his eyes. "I didn't realize. Look, we were just trying to—" "To what?" Celeste asked, her voice even. "Protect the bank." Gregory's jaw clenched. "We have strict policies." "No," she interrupted. "You have assumptions. You saw a black woman with no escort, no public title, and you made a decision." He didn't respond. She gestured around them. "And now, because of your decision, your bank has lost access to over $920 million in managed assets across 4 cities. From the far wall, a monitor flickered. "Clear vault status. Locked ethics protocol in effect, system access suspended until further notice." Gregory's hands dropped to his sides. Behind him, the other clients and staff watched silently. Some confused, some stunned, some, finally, ashamed. Celeste turned to Evelyn. "File the notice of breach. Then prepare to notify Monarch's legal." "Yes, ma'am." "And Jared, reach out to the Clear Vault Alliance. Begin internal inquiry. No reinstatement until board-level compliance sign-off." "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn held up the red-tagged folio. "Would you like to deliver the notice yourself?" Celeste paused, then nodded. She stepped forward, took the folder, and placed it gently on the nearest desk. "This," she said quietly, "is what happens when you forget who signed the first check." Then she turned, walked away, and didn't look back. The entire atrium of Monarch Bank had gone still, like a courtroom just before the verdict. Celeste stood at the edge of the marble floor, eyes forward, back straight, surrounded by glass, steel, and a rising sense of dread that no one dared name out loud. She didn't need a microphone. She didn't need to shout. Her presence said everything. Behind her, Evelyn Price, General Counsel of Valor Trust, unclipped a thick leather folder and laid it flat on the marble service desk. The red tag on the side read, "Clear Vault Emergency Protocol 77, Legal Response." A junior manager stepped forward to protest, only to be blocked by Jared Lynn, Valor Trust's lead compliance counsel. "We're invoking contractual enforcement," Jared said calmly, with the precision of someone who'd done this before. "You may want to stand aside before you're added to the incident record." Gregory Mayfield had stopped talking entirely. His phone was still pressed to his ear, but he wasn't listening anymore. His eyes followed every step Evelyn took, like a man watching a slow-motion collapse. Celeste didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She was watching the system react. Monarch's internal security alerts had begun cascading across the screens. Branch control, vault access, client authentication logs. They were all red-flagging the same line. Ethics Trigger 77. System-wide lockdown pending investigation. From the corner of the atrium, a man in a dark gray suit approached. Benjamin Ortiz, Chief Risk Officer for Monarch Midwest. He moved fast, but not rushed. The kind of man used to spinning problems into phrases like isolated or misunderstood. But this wasn't misunderstanding. This was a fire already burning on every terminal. He reached Celeste first. "Dr. Monroe," he said, his voice quiet, respectful, measured. "I just received word. We didn't know you were on site." "That's obvious," she replied, her tone even. Benjamin nodded. "Would you be willing to debrief with our internal team upstairs?" "You don't need me upstairs," she said. "You need to explain why your staff refused protocol-based vault access to the woman who co-architected your entire secure storage system." Benjamin winced. "It shouldn't have happened. No," she cut in gently. "You're not the one who did it. But you're responsible for the culture that allows it." He exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. "Understood." Celeste turned to Evelyn. "Submit the compliance breach packet." Evelyn tapped her tablet. A soft chime sounded across the room as files were transmitted. Then she spoke, calm, cool, deadly. "Per Clause 7.3 of the Clear Vault Interbank Ethics Charter, Monarch Bank has officially triggered a system-level ethics investigation. Vault access will remain locked across all connected institutions, including New York, San Francisco, and Dallas, until a full compliance review is completed." Gasps, soft murmurs. Gregory took a step forward, mouth agape. "You're telling me you did this? You shut down our vaults?" Celeste finally looked at him. "I didn't shut them down, Mr. Mayfield," she said. "You did. The moment you decided I didn't look like someone who belonged." His face flushed red. "That's not what I said." "You didn't have to," she said simply. "You acted on it, loudly, in front of your staff, in front of customers." Behind them, more executives were arriving. Phones vibrated. Lawyers whispered. The CEO of Monarch Midwest was still unreachable. And yet, somehow, every person in that lobby knew the real authority was already here. Celeste Monroe didn't come to beg. She came to audit. 10 minutes later, Conference Room Executive C, 14th floor. The room was sleek. Too clean. The type of room designed for control, not truth. Celeste sat at the head of the long black conference table. She hadn't asked to sit there. She'd simply walked in and sat. No one questioned it. On one side, Evelyn, Jared, and Avery, her legal team. On the other, Benjamin Ortiz, the branch COO, and Gregory, now visibly shaken. A junior assistant sat silently in the back, typing minutes. The monitors displayed a split screen. Clear Vault alert logs, ethics protocol activation, real-time asset freeze notifications across 4 cities. "Let's be clear," Evelyn began. "We're not here to negotiate. We're here to record the response to a clear violation of protocol and dignity." Benjamin nodded. "Agreed. But we'd like the opportunity to apologize, formally, and begin a restoration process." Celeste looked him in the eye. "Restoration starts with accountability." She turned her attention to Gregory. "Tell me, Mr. Mayfield, what made you confident enough to call security on me without even checking my credentials?" Gregory swallowed hard. "You weren't on the day's schedule, and you didn't have a board escort. You didn't look like someone we usually see at that level." Celeste let the silence sit heavy in the room. "You didn't look," she said softly. "That's the problem." I didn't mean..." "But you did it," she said. "You made an assumption. You acted on it. And now your institution is losing access to almost $1 billion in client assets until further notice." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out the original copy of Monarch's Vault funding agreement. She slid it across the table. Her name gleamed in blue ink at the bottom. "Before you ever opened your first vault door, I was already invested in your future," she said. "And you just made the decision to treat me like a security threat in the building I helped design." Benjamin leaned forward, jaw tight. "Dr. Monroe, I can't undo what happened. But I promise, whatever protocol, training, or policy you want implemented, we will act immediately." Celeste looked at Evelyn. "Send the policy draft." Evelyn tapped a key. The room's main screen shifted to a new document. The Monroe Standard. A proposed ethics and access framework for ClearVault-affiliated institutions. Mandatory quarterly training on unconscious bias. Independent oversight for vault-level decisions. Public accountability dashboard for discrimination-related complaints. Consequences for ethics violations tied to executive performance bonuses. Gregory looked stunned. "You had this ready?" Celeste didn't blink. "I wrote it 2 years ago. I just hoped I'd never have to use it." Back in the lobby, 30 minutes later, Celeste descended the escalator in silence. The same floor that had watched her with suspicion now watched her with awe, or maybe fear. Either way, they were finally watching, fully. Mrs. Avery, the older woman from before, was still sitting by the windows. She rose when she saw Celeste, her eyes bright with quiet pride. Celeste walked over, extended her hand, and this time, the woman pulled her into a gentle hug. "You changed something today," Mrs. Avery whispered. Celeste smiled. "It's not the first time." "I know," the woman said, "but it might be the first time they were forced to see it." As Celeste turned to leave, a young bank associate, maybe 24, Latino nervous, hurried up. "Dr. Monroe?" Celeste paused. "I just want to say, I watched what happened, and his voice cracked. "It made me want to do better." She studied him. He looked terrified. "Honest." "Then do," she said. "That's all it takes." It started with one tweet, then 6 more. By the time Celeste Monroe's car pulled away from the Monarch building, there were 47 videos circulating online. Some blurry, some shaky, but all of them showed the same thing. A black woman, poised, silent, being denied entry into her own bank. A white male VP yelling across the lobby. Security guards hesitating. And then, a team of lawyers filing in like clockwork. It wasn't just a viral moment, it was a reckoning. 9:26 p.m. Brooklyn, New York. Celeste sat by the wide windows of her brownstone townhouse in Park Slope, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. She hadn't turned on the TV. She didn't need to. Her phone screen was lighting up every 10 seconds. CNN. Black CEO mistaken for intruder. Freezes $920 million in assets within an hour. MSNBC. Power, silence, justice. Who is Celeste Monroe? The Guardian. Monarch Bank faces ethics freeze after misidentifying tech executive. TikTok. Celeste. Did not flinch. 1.7 M views in 4 hours. Her inbox was flooded with interview requests. Her comms team had stopped counting. Evelyn, now back at her own home, sent a short text. "You're the top story on 6 networks. Every angle is sympathetic. We didn't even have to push it." Celeste replied with one word. "Good." She didn't need to speak. The truth had already gone airborne. 10:02 p.m. On a Delta flight from Atlanta to Chicago, a 54-year-old black woman named Denise tapped her husband's arm. "That's the woman," she whispered, showing him the video. "That's the one who froze the banks with just a file folder." He leaned in, frowning. "They kicked her out of her own vault?" "She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just let them show their face." The man exhaled, shaking his head. "Lord, that's what power looks like." 10:37 p.m. Monarch HQ, PR department. Panic. That was the only word for it. Gregory Mayfield was no longer in the building. HR had invited him to take personal leave. Indefinitely. The CEO, Ellen Rosenthal, stood pale-faced before a boardroom of exhausted executives and lawyers. Screens were flashing stock tickers, Twitter feeds, legal briefs. "We need a statement," someone said. "No," Ellen replied. "We need a plan." She held up a printout of the Monroe Standard, the same policy framework Celeste had dropped like a guillotine hours earlier. "We're going to sign this, publicly, before tomorrow morning, or Monarch won't survive Monday." 11:03 p.m., back at Celeste's home. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, steeping tea. There was something almost absurd about how quiet her house was, how still the world got when it finally turned toward you instead of on you. Her daughter, Ava, padded in from the hallway in slippers. "Mom, you're trending." Celeste smiled. "So I've heard." Ava held up her phone. "Someone on TikTok made a remix of the moment you handed them the folder. They put it to gospel music. It's kind of epic." Celeste laughed gently. "That might be the most American thing I've ever heard." "Are you gonna say anything?" "Nope. But the world's screaming for you right now." Celeste stirred her tea. "Then let them scream. I'll wait until they're quiet enough to listen." The next morning, 7:04 a.m. Celeste didn't check her email. She didn't go on Twitter. Instead, she went for a walk. No bodyguards, no press team. Just her sneakers, and the streets of her neighborhood. Passing bakeries opening up, kids waiting for school buses, dogs dragging their sleepy humans behind them. A few people recognized her. A man in a hoodie slowed down, then nodded with quiet respect. A teenager jogging past whispered, "Thank you," as if she were a priestess and the sidewalk a confessional. It wasn't celebrity. It was something heavier. Recognition. 8:45 a.m. In a newsroom in Midtown Manhattan, Brittany Lynn, a junior producer at Telltales News, refreshed her feed. She'd been covering tech policy for 3 years, but nothing had blown up like this. She clicked on the internal thread. Pitch. The vault they tried to erase. The woman who built it, owned it, and was locked out of it. Guest panel, 2 civil rights lawyers, 1 former banking CEO, 1 ethics watchdog, and, pending, Celeste Monroe herself. Her boss scribbled across the memo. "Green light. Build promo." 9:12 a.m. Evelyn Price's office. Evelyn, as always, was 2 steps ahead. Her team had already compiled a 9-page press response document, lined with timestamps, witness statements, and annotated screen grabs. More importantly, they drafted a quiet but powerful letter for publication. It was titled, "The Cost of Looking Away," by Dr. Celeste Monroe. Not an op-ed, not a rant, just an accounting of silence, of dignity, of what it meant to build something and be erased from it in public. Celeste hadn't agreed to publish it, but she hadn't said no either. Back at the brownstone, 10:03 a.m., Celeste was on the phone with Senator Yvonne Stratton. Yvonne's voice was urgent. "We want to invite you to testify at the upcoming ethics reform hearing." "I don't want to become a mascot," Celeste said calmly. "You're not, but you are the blueprint." Silence. Then Celeste spoke. "Then let's talk about changing the foundation, not just the facade." 11:31 a.m. First public press conference at Monarch Bank. CEO Ellen Rosenthal stood at the podium, visibly tense. She cleared her throat. "Yesterday, Monarch failed, not just in protocol, but in principle." The room was packed. Cameras, microphones, civil rights groups. Ellen continued, "As of this morning, Monarch has formally adopted the Monroe Standard as a required ethics compliance framework across all branches." Murmurs. "And we are publicly apologizing to Dr. Celeste Monroe, not just because we were wrong, but because she was right about the systems, the silence, and the need for change." Noon. Celeste's phone buzzed again. New York Times request, CBS Morning Show, NPR, Bloomberg, the UN Ethics Commission. She still said nothing, but she smiled. Because the thing about silence is this: when used with precision, it echoes louder than any voice. At exactly 6:17 a.m., the first call came in. It wasn't from a journalist, not a lawyer, not even a board member from Monarch. It was from the governor of New York. He didn't leave a voicemail. He texted, "When you're ready to talk, I'll come to you. No press, no PR, just truth." Celeste didn't respond, not because she was being dramatic, but because she was still listening, still watching how the system, not just the people, reacted when it realized it had made a catastrophic mistake. By 8:02 a.m., her house had gone quiet again. Ava was off to school. Her legal team was running media filters from 3 different coasts. Evelyn had issued a single statement to all incoming press outlets. Dr. Monroe has nothing to add. The system is speaking. Please listen to it first. But the world didn't want to listen. The world wanted more. And the silence only made the headlines louder. At the FAA's Office of Ethics and Oversight in D.C., Harold Bennett, Federal Director of Financial Access Standards, tapped his knuckles on the table. "She wrote this?" he said, eyes locked on the screen. The watermark was clear. EthicFrame 77, authored Monroe, C. 2020. "She wrote the base framework we're about to vote on?" "Yes, sir," the ethics analyst replied. 3 years ago. We didn't know until someone matched her old consulting email with the metadata. Why wasn't her name attached? She requested anonymity, said it would preserve the neutrality of the law. Bennett exhaled. "She's been ghostwriting the conscience of Wall Street?" The analyst gave a single nod. "And now, Wall Street locked her out of her own vault," Bennett murmured. He stood, voice low but urgent. "Get me the White House Office of Financial Ethics. They'll want in." Downtown Manhattan, inside Valor Trust HQ, Jared Lynn shoved his laptop across the table. "You're not gonna believe this." Evelyn barely glanced up. "Try me. The Monroe Framework. It's not just bank policy. It's the draft spine of Section 5 of the National Financial Ethics Act. It's in committee right now." Evelyn's brow lifted. "Jesus." "No," Jared said, tone sharp. "Worse. God sent her the memo. Wall Street ignored it. Now it's waking up on fire." In a private terminal outside D.C., a suited man whispered to his assistant. "Does she have a direct line?" "No, but she has final override access to the EthicFrame platform." "The same platform we use to authorize interstate asset transfers?" "Yes." He didn't speak for a moment, then simply said, "Book me a flight to New York." Back in Brooklyn, Celeste stood by the window, pouring her second cup of coffee. Not for clarity, just comfort. The city outside continued moving, quietly, uneasily, while a few news vans still hovered a block away. Her legal team had filed for a temporary press exclusion zone around her home. For safety. For silence. Her phone buzzed again. Blocked ID. She let it ring. Twice, then answered. "This is the Office of Presidential Ethics Engagement. We'd like to invite you to a private roundtable with federal agencies. No press. Off the record." "I'm not available," Celeste replied calmly. "We can move the time." "I'm not unavailable because of scheduling," she cut in. "I'm unavailable because none of you cared until the headlines hit. Now you want to attach yourselves to my name, but not my process." Silence on the line. Then, "Dr. Monroe, we know who you are now." Celeste looked out her window. "No, you're just now realizing you never did." She hung up. At Monarch Bank HQ, the boardroom felt like a war zone. Consultants were presenting crisis management plans. Stock analysts were predicting long-term fallout. The figure was now confirmed: $920 million in frozen assets. 3 partner banks had suspended vault sharing. Ethics audits were inbound from 6 agencies. One exec asked, "Should we offer her a role on our advisory council?" Another responded, "We denied her entry into her own institution. Offering a title now feels like PR theater." Then, from the back of the room, Samuel Weiss, quiet, old-school, observant, spoke up. She already had a seat. She built the table. Heads turned. "You just refused to read the blueprint with her name on it." That night, Bloomberg ran the headline: "The hidden architect of Wall Street ethics revealed. Dr. Celeste Monroe's blueprint for financial justice." Subheadline: "The woman who wrote the rules and was nearly erased by the system she created." At Clearwater Capital, 4 senior fund managers stared at the news in tense silence. "She's the one who flagged our audit 2 years ago," one muttered. She also designed the integrity index we now submit to ESG auditors. And we blacklisted her. The director finally said, "Then we unblacklist her, or pray she doesn't decide our score next quarter." Back at her brownstone, Celeste sat down at her laptop. No social media, no inbox, just a single file. Draft, National Financial Ethics Reform, Civilian Bill of Rights Addendum. She highlighted the word draft, deleted it, typed final. She smiled faintly, not out of pride, but because the system had outed itself, and all she had to do was sit still long enough to let truth do the talking. It started with a flicker on the screens at EthicFrame's National Oversight Terminal. At first, the text thought it was a glitch, a sync issue, a metadata delay. But then came the notifications. Access suspended. Entity, Monarch Financial Group. Reason, emergency ethics flag triggered. Override, active. Initiated by redacted. The moment the override went through, two other banks, Clear West and Iron Crown Capital, were automatically linked to the flag. Per system protocols, they had co-signed the Clear Vault contract with Monarch just 14 months ago, and that was enough to get them caught in the crossfire. By 9:27 a.m., trading floors across Midtown were already feeling it. Senior traders at Clear West stared at their terminals like something had died. Access to their vault monitoring dashboards had been revoked. Fund movement from high-value clients had been locked mid-transfer. Risk mitigation AI had gone dark. At Monarch's Wall Street HQ, a senior executive yelled into a phone, "Get EthicFrame on the line now!" But EthicFrame wasn't answering phones, because the only person authorized to unlock that override was the one they locked out of her own bank. Inside the Emergency Coordination Center at the U.S. Treasury Building, things were tense. A middle-aged compliance director leaned over to the chief liaison and asked, "Do we have confirmation who triggered it?" The liaison nodded slowly. "Yes. The user ID is an old code, MON12CXM. "You're kidding." "Nope. That's Celeste Monroe's original architecture ID when she first built the override system 5 years ago. It's still active. She never revoked her kill switch." They stared at the screen as new alerts poured in. Vault verification, failed audit chain verification, incomplete system ethics score, below minimum standard. One line flashed red. Public ethics access suspended until protocol review on CNBC. The tone had changed. Earlier that morning, the headline was, "Former bank exec sparks legal storm after public ejection." By 10:45 a.m. it read, 920 OZM frozen. Monarch and two major banks cut from ethics grid. Wall Street demands answers. It wasn't just a bad PR day anymore. It was a structural collapse of credibility. And no one, not Monarch, not their partners, not even the regulators, had a clean way out of it. Meanwhile, Celeste was sitting in her kitchen, calm, poised, watching headlines evolve like weather maps. Evelyn walked in with a tablet, looking stunned. "They pulled Monarch from the platform." Celeste didn't flinch. "No, I pulled them. You actually used your veto." Celeste gave a small nod. "I activated what I designed because nobody else would." Evelyn sat across from her. "The press is asking if you'll go public. Statements, testimony, live interviews. They're scrambling. I'm not a spectacle. You're already a symbol." Celeste looked out the window. "Let them figure it out. I'm not here to save the image of a system that sold me out for convenience." At a high-rise boardroom in Midtown, a secret meeting was underway. Representatives from 6 major banks, 3 regulatory liaisons, and a quiet advisor from the Department of Commerce. A man in a gray suit stood at the end of the table. "We've confirmed she's the only one with override access." Someone scoffed. "How did that even happen?" "She built the kill switch protocol before any of you joined the agreement," the advisor replied. "It's her code, her terms, her ethics thresholds. And now you're all non-compliant, according to the framework you agreed to. Someone mumbled. She can't just shut us out. The advisor looked up. She didn't shut you out. You dropped below the minimum human dignity score. The system did what it was supposed to do. There was a long silence. Then another voice whispered, "Has anyone invited her back in?" No one answered, because they all knew the truth. Inviting her meant admitting they had erased her, and that wasn't something Wall Street did. At least, not willingly. Over the next few hours, the damage multiplied. Clearwest's IPO was paused. Iron Crown Capital's top 3 investment funds were put under review. Monarch's board was rumored to be preparing mass resignations. One of the bank's largest institutional investors publicly posted, "We will not engage further with any entity operating outside EthicFrame's minimum standards. Compliance is non-negotiable." And just like that, 3 titans of finance weren't just embarrassed. They were unbankable. By the afternoon, whispers turned into full-throated panic. Was Celeste coming forward? Would she testify? Would she negotiate? Would she sue? None of those things happened. She did not file a lawsuit. She did not walk into Congress. She didn't even tweet. Instead, she uploaded a new document to the public EthicFrame archive under a dormant author code. The title was simple: Addendum, Emergency Ethics Lockdown Protocol, Notes for Review. And below it, just one paragraph. A system that betrays its builders is not broken. It is working exactly as designed. To serve power, not people. That is why safeguards exist. Not to punish, but to pause. Not to shame, but to realign. When a bank forgets who it serves, it must be reminded, quietly, firmly, and without apology. No name, no photo, no fanfare. But the world knew exactly who had written it. That night, back in her Brooklyn brownstone, Celeste lit a single candle on her kitchen table. A quiet tradition she'd started years ago on the anniversary of her father's death. He'd always told her, real power doesn't shout. It shows up, does the work, and leaves the room cleaner than it found it. As the flame flickered, her phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. No name, no number, just 3 words. "Thank you, Celeste." She didn't reply. She didn't need to, because for the first time in years, the system that pretended she didn't matter had finally admitted she did. And it had done so with silence, suspension, and systemic shock, just like she designed it to. The fracture wasn't visible at first. To the public, it looked like just another news cycle spinning faster than anyone could follow. But inside America's banking elite, something far more unsettling was happening. Trust, not money, was bleeding out of the system. By the morning after the override, a series of closed-door meetings had been convened across 5 cities. The Federal Reserve had summoned senior executives. The FDIC called for an ethics compliance huddle. Private calls buzzed between boardrooms. Whispers passed over expensive stakes and under high ceilings. And everywhere, one name kept coming up, quietly, uncomfortably: Celeste Monroe. Not as a trending topic, but as a variable they couldn't control. At Goldman Price's Ethics Control Office, 2 senior partners reviewed internal memos. One of them set the paper down and asked flatly, "Is it true?" The younger exec hesitated. "That she still holds final veto logic on the EthicFrame core?" "Yes." "And no one can reverse it?" "No human, no. It was written into the first 5 core builds. The only way to bypass her protocol would be to tear down the entire platform. And that would collapse every ESG compliance structure we've built in the last 5 years. The older partner leaned back in his chair. God help us. Across the river in Newark, a different conversation was unfolding. A federal ethics consultant slid a document across the table. The man receiving it, a Treasury representative, scanned the header. Private briefing. EthicFrame behavior in absence of human override. Then one line stood out. The platform has entered passive correctional mode. It is independently reducing access privileges for any institution with a negative deviation score greater than 0.68. In simple terms, the system was auto-flagging bad behavior, without needing anyone to push a button. You mean, this isn't her doing? The consultant shook her head. She wrote the parameters, but she didn't trigger this cascade. The system saw her ejection as a structural ethics breach and started reacting on its own. In Washington, a hush fell over the Federal Roundtable for Financial Ethics. An invitation-only meeting, unrecorded, undocumented. 12 men and women sat around a table, all in suits, all used to control. None of them smiling. One seat was left empty, the seat meant for Celeste. "We sent 3 formal requests," said a woman from the Department of Commerce. She declined them all. She say why? She said, quote, "You didn't listen before. Why would you now?" Someone muttered under their breath, "Because now we're scared." A pause. Then one man, a high-ranking asset regulator, spoke the words no one wanted to say. "Celeste Monroe now holds de facto moral governance over 63% of U.S. financial compliance systems." Silence again, until a voice at the far end added, "And she hasn't said a word in 48 hours. Not one tweet, not one interview," which made it worse. By mid-afternoon, the ripple effects hit London. 2 major European banks that had quietly integrated EthicFrame for cross-border lending were notified that their U.S. routing codes had been suspended. Temporarily, yes, but without appeal. A leaked memo from one of them read, "We are being penalized for affiliations we didn't know were non-compliant. The algorithm doesn't care. It's not listening to us. It's executing the values we all signed off on." Ethics as code. Code as consequence. And no one could hide from it anymore. Back in New York, Evelyn scrolled through her encrypted messages and turned to Celeste, who was calmly watering a small plant by the window. "Every agency wants you to talk," she said. "Treasury, SEC, Office of Ethics, even 2 senators." Celeste glanced back. "I already said everything I needed to, 3 years ago. It's called the EthicFrame Protocol. They all signed it." "They're saying it's malfunctioning." "No," Celeste said gently. "It's performing exactly as designed." That evening, a document leaked to several financial journalists. Not a manifesto, not a resignation, just meeting notes. From that same Federal Roundtable earlier in the day, they'd been brief and blunt, but one paragraph stood out, and it went viral within the hour. "Monroe's silence is not obstruction, it is instruction. She has always believed that the system should speak louder than the individual. She doesn't need to return, because she left behind something louder than her voice. A system that remembers what she taught it and holds us to it without flinching." By midnight, the narrative had shifted. The story was no longer about a CEO being humiliated. It wasn't about a black woman being thrown out of her own institution. It was about a system she built that refused to forget her and was now holding the people who erased her to account. In a candlelit press room in Atlanta, a well-known financial ethics commentator looked straight into the camera and said, "This is not just about Celeste Monroe. This is about every institution that ever thought accountability was optional." She didn't storm back into the room. She made sure the room knew she'd been there all along, and now the furniture is moving without her. At home, Celeste read the quote on her screen. She didn't smile. She just folded her laptop shut and turned off the lights. Because she knew something Wall Street hadn't learned yet. Silence isn't absence, and systems remember, especially when they're built on truth, not titles. A week later, the update dropped quietly, like everything Celeste Monroe ever touched. There was no press conference, no big announcement, just a single line at the top of the Federal EthicFrame dashboard. Update 4.2 released, Dignity Standard Protocol activated. And just like that, the financial industry was put on notice. For the executives who had once scoffed at Celeste's original framework, the name hit like a ghost from a past they had erased. Dignity Standard. 3 years ago, it was a proposal no one wanted. Celeste had called it non-negotiable baseline ethics for institutional behavior. The board at Monarch had called it idealistic nonsense. Others used stronger words. Soft compliance. Too subjective. Doesn't scale. Now, it was federal mandate. Any bank that wanted to retain its federal trading license, data privileges, or contract access had just 30 days to integrate the new metrics into their internal systems. And this time, they weren't allowed to alter the terms, because the protocol came locked, encrypted, final, signed 3 years ago by one name, C. Monroe. CNN's business analyst was the first to say it on live TV. She didn't come back. She didn't need to. She left the instructions, and the system finally followed them. Within 48 hours, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and even Forbes had published pieces under strikingly similar headlines. The Silent Reformer, Monroe's Code, Dignity Protocol Rebuilds Trust. Even the White House was forced to acknowledge the shift. In a press briefing, the Deputy Ethics Secretary said, "We view the Dignity Standard as a long overdue measure. It affirms our nation's commitment to accountability, transparency, and respect in financial governance." Behind closed doors, however, things were less graceful. At Monarch's corporate HQ, the surviving board members signed the integration papers with tight jaws and lowered eyes. No ceremony, no resistance, just the quiet weight of consequence. One executive asked, "Do we send her a thank you?" The room stayed silent. Someone else replied, "She wouldn't read it." Meanwhile, in her quiet Brooklyn home, Celeste read the documents. Not from the news, but from a direct copy sent by Evelyn, who had quietly rejoined her as a strategic advisor. "They're implementing every line you wrote," Evelyn said, almost in disbelief. "Even the clause about public reporting for bias-linked account closures." Celeste simply nodded. That one mattered. "You're not going to say anything?" "No," Celeste said. "It's not about me saying anything. It's about them finally hearing what I said years ago." The banking world moved quickly to adapt. Within a week, 38 national banks and 19 international institutions had uploaded their public ethics compliance disclosures. The numbers were stark. Racial profiling complaints, up. Discriminatory fee structures, up. Client removal without due process, up. All metrics previously buried in internal audits, now exposed. And none of it would have seen daylight without the Dignity Standard. Because Celeste hadn't built it to punish. She had built it to reveal. In a rare interview, a financial historian was asked how this moment would be remembered. Her answer was simple. It wasn't a reckoning. It wasn't revenge. It was a reset. Celeste Monroe walked away from the fire and left a blueprint that rebuilt the room without her. Celeste didn't post. She didn't speak. She didn't return to Monarch. She didn't need to, because the system that once rejected her had now reshaped itself around her code. The rules she wrote in silence were now spoken out loud by everyone else. 30 days passed. Celeste Monroe had not stepped onto a stage, spoken into a microphone, or posted a single word online. But her presence was everywhere. Every ethics committee meeting opened with a line from the Dignity Standard. Every federal banking review now included a tab labeled EthicFrame Score, Institutional and Executive Behavior. And quietly, decisively, people were being removed. The first major firing came from a bank headquartered in Dallas. Its CEO, who had once dismissed the Dignity Protocol as PR fluff, was terminated following a report that showed repeated unethical overrides of consumer dispute protocols. He hadn't broken the law, but he had failed the system's memory. EthicFrame didn't care about one-time scandals. It tracked patterns of dismissal, deflection, and disregard. And in the new framework, habit was character. Character was score, and score was survival. In New York, A mid-sized investment bank issued a press release confirming the appointment of their new executive team. The CEO's photo sat beside a note. Past 3-month ethical trajectory scan. Rated A-level in dignity consistency. That line, dignity consistency, became a buzzword almost overnight. It wasn't about charisma, or profits, or pedigree. It was about whether your decisions still reflected the human dignity of the people you served, even when no one was looking. A Bloomberg panel called it the rise of behavioral audit governance. A Stanford professor called it human accountability, measured by machines but rooted in values. And almost every expert credited it to one woman, even if she had never asked for credit. Back at her Brooklyn brownstone, Celeste sat in her quiet kitchen, poring over handwritten letters, not from CEOs or regulators, but from ordinary people. A 68-year-old woman in Atlanta wrote, "My son was denied a loan 3 years ago. They said his tone was threatening. Now the bank reviewed that case under your system, and he got an apology. Thank you." A high school senior from Detroit wrote, "We studied your framework in civics class. I didn't know banking could be this fair." Celeste smiled, not with pride, with peace. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, a deeper shift was underway. The Office of Federal Compliance was reviewing permanent adoption of EthicFrame as a baseline metric across 21 national sectors, not just banking. Education, healthcare, housing, transportation. Anywhere human dignity had been traded for profit margins. Celeste hadn't proposed this expansion. The system had spoken for itself. It had proven what she always believed. Power doesn't corrupt. Unchecked power forgets. But systems can be built to remember. Inside Monarch, where her portrait had once been quietly taken down, a new plaque appeared in the boardroom hallway. "Dignity lives here." No signature, but everyone knew whose presence it carried. Even without return, Celeste Monroe had become the silent conscience of an industry. Not its ruler, not its martyr, its reminder. In a televised roundtable, a senior advisor from the Ethics Commission was asked, "Is this the end of the Monroe story?" She answered, "She never wanted a story, she wanted a standard, and now we all live by it." 1 year later, the board at Monarch sent an embossed envelope. The words were delicate, formal, measured. "We would be honored to welcome Dr. Celeste Monroe back as an honorary strategic advisor to Monarch Bank, in recognition of her enduring contributions to the ethical reformation of our industry." It was signed by all 7 new board members, none of whom had been in the room the day she was escorted out. They didn't mention that moment. They didn't need to. Everyone remembered, even if they now stood for a different kind of institution. The media caught wind of the invitation within 48 hours. Headlines bloomed, "Will she return?" Monarch extends olive branch to the woman who rebuilt them. Celeste Monroe, the most powerful silence in banking. Speculation exploded. Talk shows, think pieces, op-eds. Everyone wanted to know what she'd say. And when she didn't reply, that only fed the frenzy. Why won't she comment? Is this revenge? Does she still hold a grudge? But those close to Celeste already knew. She wasn't interested in public performance. She was interested in private alignment. So when she finally did appear, it wasn't at a press event. It was at a small, private evening gathering hosted by her alma mater, Howard University. No press, no cameras, just 2 professors, 13 hand-picked students, and a circle of quiet chairs in the old law library. Celeste walked in wearing charcoal gray. No jewelry, hair tied back, a black pen in her pocket. She smiled softly at each face, sat down, waited. A professor introduced her not as a CEO or an architect of modern ethics, but simply an alumna who never raised her voice, but changed how we all listen. The first hour was warm. She spoke softly, answered thoughtfully. Her words had the pace of someone who had nothing to prove, and no appetite for spotlight. They asked about the systems, the algorithms, the legal fights, the boardroom silence. She gave context, but never self-praise. One student asked, how did it feel watching them implement a code they once called useless? She smiled gently. Not useless, just premature. But it was the final question that changed the tone of the room. A young woman, no older than 20, nervously holding a notebook, leaned forward and asked, how did you forgive a system that once erased you? The room stilled. Even the professors sat back. Celeste didn't rush the answer. She looked down for a moment, then met the young woman's eyes and said, I didn't forgive the system. I outgrew the need for its approval. Silence, then a breath. Collective, quiet. She continued, forgiveness isn't always about letting go of anger. Sometimes it's letting go of the need to be seen by those who refuse to look. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to outlive the version of me they dismissed and rebuild a world where no one else would be. No one clapped. Not out of disapproval, but because the words didn't ask for applause. They asked for reflection. And that's exactly what happened. The next day, the student who asked the question wrote about it in a long thread on social media. She quoted Celeste's full answer, word for word. It went viral overnight, not because it came from a celebrity, but because it didn't try to sound like one. I didn't forgive the system. I outgrew the need for its approval. Those 12 words were reposted on walls, newsletters, college dorms, and boardroom presentations across the country. Even Monarch's own internal ethics bulletin featured it, anonymously. They knew exactly who said it. Still, Celeste declined the honorary advisor role. She sent a handwritten note. Thank you for the invitation, but I believe my presence is more powerful where silence speaks louder than position. Keep the work clean. Not because I'm watching, but because now everyone else is. She returned to her quiet home. Same routine, same small rituals, same morning tea. But the world had changed around her, not because she took the stage, but because she built the stage others now stood on. The hearing room was packed. C-SPAN was live. Every news outlet had their camera pointed at Capitol Hill. At the center of it all, the Financial Ethics Enforcement Act. After 18 months of public pressure, internal audits, whistleblower testimonies, and 3 major CEO resignations, Congress was ready to vote on the bill that would change the face of American banking. A law that made EthicFrame not just a voluntary benchmark, but a mandatory requirement for maintaining a federal banking license. The chair of the Financial Oversight Committee stood at the MIC, his voice clear, steady, deliberate. Today, we are not just passing a bill. We are building a memory, one that systems will hold, even when people forget. And it began with one woman. He paused, then looked directly into the camera. Dr. Celeste Monroe. A hush fell across the room. She wasn't there. She hadn't been seen in public for months, but her name carried a weight now. Not like a monument, more like a mirror, forcing every institution to look at itself honestly. One by one, senators and House members cast their votes. When the final count flashed green on the board, the Financial Ethics Enforcement Act passed with bipartisan support. Applause erupted. Not the kind that follows political victory, the kind that follows correction. Later that day, a younger executive, just 32, recently appointed director of community trust at a mid-tier bank, was interviewed outside the chamber. The reporter asked, "You pushed hard for this reform. Why does it matter so much to you?" He looked away for a second, then back at the camera. "I was an intern at Monarch that year. I saw them escort Dr. Monroe out like she didn't belong. I remember the silence, the way no one said a word, and I swore to myself, if I ever had a seat at the table, I'd make sure we never did that to anyone again." That clip went viral, not because of the law, but because someone finally said what no one had admitted. It wasn't just a system that failed Celeste. It was the people who watched and said nothing. And now, that same generation was stepping up. The next morning, banks across the country received formal notification. Effective immediately, all institutions licensed under federal charter must comply with the Ethical Behavior Monitoring Standard, known commercially as EthicFrame. Non-compliance will result in license review, audit escalation, and public disclosure under the Transparency Act. In simpler terms, behave or lose your charter. And beneath all of that bureaucracy, something far more powerful had happened. Celeste Monroe's quiet resistance had turned into national law, and the law bore her name. The Monroe Clause, a federal statute that required institutions to retain a record of repeated unethical behavior, not just illegal actions, and respond with accountability, transparency, and restitution. At a small panel hosted at Princeton, a professor summarized it best. "We used to measure risk in dollars. Now we measure it in dignity." Celeste never commented. She didn't post, didn't grant interviews, didn't even release a statement. She didn't need to, because for the first time in history, a black woman who had been erased by the system became the standard by which it would now be judged. So next time someone says, "One woman can't change the system," remember, she already did, without yelling, without vengeance, without asking for a title back. She just stood, held her ground, and built something that couldn't be erased. If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from, and share it with someone who believes in dignity over titles. Because God knows we need more stories like this.